Deacon Father Wesley, Deacon Glenn, Seminarian Andrew McNally, my dear brothers and sisters in Christ, Jesus is the King. Jesus is the King of the universe, where 100 billion stars were simply spoken into existence by him. Jesus is our King. All our creation gives praise to Jesus, our King. The mountains and hills break out to song before him. Animals, wild and tame, all creatures that crawl, and all birds that fly give praise to him. And we give praise to Jesus, our King, every time we come to Mass, where we raise our voices in song and prayer and thanksgiving for what he has done for us. And what has Jesus, our King, done for us? He has destroyed sin and death. And because of this, you and I may one day dwell in the house of our Father in heaven. St. Paul, in our second reading today, reminds us that death exists in this world because of the disobedience of Adam. When God created us, he gave us this beautiful gift that's called free will. And because of this, we are free to love God or not to love God. So when we say to someone we love them, it's not only our words that speak love, but it is also our actions. And it can be easy to give someone lip service, to tell them one thing and do something else. We've all heard the saying, our actions speak louder than our words. Well, Adam and Eve's actions were very selfish, even after all that God had given them. And in their free will, they chose by their actions to disobey God. And so death entered the world. And not only physical death, but spiritual death. And none of us can escape suffering and death. No matter how much fame, fortune, money, power, knowledge we think we may have. But because Jesus has been raised from the dead, all of us can escape spiritual death and rise with him with a new resurrected body. God's written word says that those who believe and truly love God shall be brought to life on the last day of judgment. In our gospel reading today, Jesus uses the example of a shepherd separating the sheep from the goats in order to describe to his disciples what the last day of judgment would look like. Jesus talks about the Son of Man coming in glory. And Jesus in his gospel does not mince his words when he describes how the sheep on the right, those who love him and obey his commands, will hear the words, "Come and inherit the kingdom prepared for you." While the goats on the left, who chose not to love and obey him, will be told, "Depart from me, you accursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and the angels." And yes, there is an eternal fire of hell. Jesus makes it clear that our love for God is demonstrated by our actions, and that we will be judged on the last day and divided out accordingly, as a shepherd divides out the flock. Now, shepherding was a common occupation in the Holy Land at the time of Jesus. And so when Jesus uses this story of the shepherd judging his flock and separating the goats and the sheep, those people could relate to him. Well, for us here as people and residents of Juneau County, shepherding flocks and knowing the difference between sheep and goats is more than likely something very foreign to us. So I did a little research. And so what are the difference between sheep and goats? Well, the first thing is their color. In Jesus' time, the sheep were mostly white, while the goats tended to be black. The sheep's tail hangs down, while the goat's tail points up. But besides these visual differences, the main difference between sheep and goats is how they behave while foraging or looking for food. Sheep are grazers. They ramble slowly, eating short plants that are close to the ground. And sheep have strong flocking instincts. They tend to stay together. They are sheepish. They trust in the shepherd. They listen to his voice. They follow his commands because they know that his commands will keep them out of danger. Well, the goats, on the other hand, they're browsers. They look for leaves and twigs and vines and shrubs. And their climbing ability allows them to climb into difficult hills in pursuit of food. And because of a goat's natural curiosity and independence, it tends to get them into trouble. You might say they are less likely to listen to the commands of the shepherd. A sheep tends to follow the shepherd, while a goat is more headstrong, more vigorous, stubborn, and more difficult to control. A person living in the friendship with God is like the sheep who hear the commands of Jesus, our good shepherd. This person, out of love for Jesus, will respond to his commands by feeding their neighbor, welcoming the stranger, clothing the naked. And they will hear the voice of God speaking to them every day. And they will say to themselves, how can I love and better serve God this day and my neighbor? A person who lives only for themselves, who's proud of their independence, and who's curious about the ways of the world, that person will not hear the voice of the shepherd. They are more like a goat. Because they do not hear the voice of Jesus, the good shepherd, their goals in life will be centered around themselves and what they can do to fulfill themselves, and they will use others for their own gain. Psalm 36 speaks about how sin directs the heart of the wicked person, how their eyes are closed to the fear of God, and how at night in their bed they think and plot wicked ways. I think all of us can be guilty at times of living for God one moment and then living for ourselves the next. And we can be guilty of holding grudges and at times laying there at night in bed thinking about that person that upset us, how we just can't wait to see them next, just give them our peace of mind. Well, and with social media today and the ability to text and so forth, it's so easy to communicate a hurtful message to someone. When we don't listen and obey Jesus, the Good Shepherd, but instead listen to the voice of the world, we become like those sheep that wander off and place themselves in extreme danger without even knowing it. And many people today are wandering off from our Good Shepherd and placing themselves in danger. A study was conducted recently which took a close look at the religious beliefs held by American teenagers. And in this study, they found that the faith held and described by most adolescents came down to something they described as moralistic therapeutic deism. What is moralistic therapeutic deism? Well, it's where a person believes that there is a God of some kind up there looking down on the earth, looking over human life, and they believe that this God just wants everyone to be kind and nice. Just like in the Bible, they teach all these other world religions, and they see all these religions in the Bible all the same thing. And we know this is false. They believe that as long as you are kind to others, you will go to heaven. And their central goal in life is to be happy and to feel good about themselves. The message of the cross and suffering is not acceptable. To die for oneself and sacrifice for others like a husband does for his wife, a mother for her children, a friend for another friend, that's seen and looked at as foolish. Lastly, they hold the belief that God does not need to be particularly involved in your daily life except when there's a problem. Our God in heaven doesn't just want to hear from us when we desperately need something or there's a problem in our life. No, he wants a relationship with us. He wants to hear from us when things are good or when things are difficult. As a parent of 8 adult children, I'm always happy when I get a little text that might come from one of them that says, "Hi Dad, thinking of you," or "Hey, I heard you were ill, I'm praying for you." And if one of those children of mine would call and say, "I need help," I would be right there. And our Father in heaven is no different. He loves each one of us in a very unique way, and He has a plan and a purpose for all of our lives. Jesus is the Good Shepherd who will leave the 99 to rescue that one sheep that has strayed from the sheepfold. And sometimes that one that needs to be rescued will leave intentionally. Most often, though, a person strays off just because they're lax in a relationship with God. They stop praying and reaching out to God. And little by little, they no longer hear the voice of the shepherd who's there to protect us from danger. Even when we are not faithful in our relationship with God, He is always faithful. And all of us are called to be like Jesus. We are called to love the other person even though they may not return their love to us. We are called to listen to the other person even when they're not interested in listening to us. We are called to give to others a drink, our shirt off our back, to visit them if they're alone. And we do this even when they cannot ever repay that to us. Jesus taught us what love and obedience to the will of our Father in heaven looks like. Jesus, who is God, emptied Himself and took the form of a slave when He took on our humanity. And Jesus knows what it's like to suffer physical pain, to be unloved by others, to not be listened and heard by others. But He died for us so that we can have eternal life, joy, and peace in heaven, rather than never-ending torment and suffering in hell. St. Paul in Romans 5:19 says that it was through Jesus' obedience that many will be made righteous. Jesus' gift of salvation for us we can never repay. The only way we have to get back to Jesus is our humble and contrite heart, a heart that leans on Jesus, our King, when we fall short in loving our God and our neighbor. Our eternal destiny, as we read in the gospel, depends on how we respond with love and obedience to God and how we love our neighbor. At the Diocesan Center in La Crosse, where Bishop Callahan governs, leads, and shepherds the many baptized souls that are entrusted to him, in the Diocesan Center there's a chapel called the Christ the King Chapel. And there's an image there in that chapel that reminds us of the kingship of Jesus. The image is not Jesus on the throne with the angels around Him as we read in our gospel today. It's not Jesus on a horse with a sword in hand leading all His disciples to fight against the enemy. No, it's an image of Jesus at His greatest act of love for us. This image shows Him with a golden crown on His head. He's dressed in the vestments of a priest, because Jesus is the high priest. And His arms are outstretched, and He's looking down from a cross. Can we hear Him say to us, "I love you, I thirst for you. Will you not give your love to us in return?"